Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome everybody. I'm grateful to the sponsors, particularly your and the Genetics Pharma, who have been supporting us throughout in this series of lectures, seminars, or whatever you may call it. Ideally we would like to have this interactive, but somehow that is not possible within the time limits and so on. And I am also grateful to Dr. Mohammad Saeed, who has, on my request, also agreed to join me and add his yes, part of the word and all the things, experience he can share with us and so. So today is in fact this one, how to do research in a busy clinical setting, part 2, because we completed part 1 about maybe 2-3 weeks ago. So today is the part 2, and in this we again start with some of the questions that have been put to us. And like in this case, the question is, I am a resident in an academic hospital. Pick the keywords from here, some academic hospital, and want to research in common diseases in my specialty. Well, specialty is important. I am required to submit a thesis. This is what happens for post-graduation. You either submit a thesis, or some places it is called as dissertation and so on. And for my graduation, or 2 research papers. Yes, many individuals opt for this. Well, neither of 2 is an easy task. In fact, it requires some efforts, and that is the thing. So the comfort in research paper is whatever you submit, that is seen already by independent reviewers. This is how it is published in a reputable journal. What are the reputable journals? Reputable journals are those which are recognized by HEC or PMDC. Now it is MC or something. Anyway, so this is the thing, and we shall sometime, talk in detail about those journals. I prefer the opinion of research papers, but I do not know where to start the research. So first thing, before you think of actually publishing a paper or doing or writing a thesis, it is the research area or the research in your mind that you should start first. So we shall pay some time on this. So starting with that, you have to have a question, right? Why are research questions important? This is the thing. Anywhere you go, any thesis you submit, any paper you submit, the reviewer would also like to first thing see that what is the question, what is the issue, what is this person is trying to answer. So that is important. So well-crafted questions guide the systematic planning of research. This is what happens. That, for instance, if I say, how can I travel to maybe some places, Gilgit say? So that is my question, isn't it? How can I do something? That is my question. So then you plan, okay, if I go by bus, it will be like this. If I go by the other means like aeroplane, there could be some issues from Islamabad, that the weather conditions and all these. So that simple thing, for a simplest thing, it is the question always. So likewise, in clinical issues, in research, it is the question that comes first. So well-crafted questions guide the systematic planning of research. On that basis, you actually plan how the research will follow. So formulating your question precisely, this is the thing. should not be the, ifs and buts. It's precisely enables you to design a study with a good chance of answering them. If you answer the question, you look, the answer in most cases is yes or no, right? Yes or no. Any disease I see in a particular group or something is more common in Karachi, yes or no. So this is the kind of thing which you are looking for. So a good research question, first thing is clear and specific, right? Clear and specific. For instance, what is the birth rate in Pakistan, right? How would you, get the answer for this? There may be an easy way to find out, because what has been happening is that there are, in fact, there are some sorry, yeah, there are some, you can say, annual reports, population council, right? Where from you can get the answer. But does this then require research? You will come up with answer? No, it does not. So that means it has to be something for which the answer is not easily available. If it is easily available, you cannot, there is no point in pursuing that. So, but for instance, if you want to look at, for instance, what are the causes of rheumatoid arthritis? Oh, this is the thing. What is it? Rheumatoid arthritis you want to look. And why? Because some of you might be commonly, it is commonly seen in Karachi, okay, where you practice. So there will be several type of questions. Why it is common? Is it common amongst some ethnic group? It is common among some special type of workers, maybe skilled, non-skilled. It is common in elderlies. So all sort of things will come up, and then you will try to answer who is affected, which one of this group, what, rheumatoid arthritis, why, this is what you want to look for. Then there are practical clarification you would like, where is this happening? Oh, most patients which come to my clinic are coming from, say, Gadap. I just hypothetically, right? Okay, where this is, when? This is more common in winter, or maybe some infectious disease, you can say. So how is this happening? This is, so in fact, for a research question, there are always 5 W's and 1 H for which you need to get the answer. So once clarified all these things, who, what, where, why is affected, then you can say and draft and formulate your question, right? That should be reviewed to see it really required research. Like the previous one, I said that what is the birth rate in Pakistan? You will not find it, there unanswered, in the sense that there are documents and so where from you can get a clear answer. And then when you do the literature search in this case, you may find that, oh, there are 250 publications already about rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, so you will review those, you may get the answer of all those, or you find that there are some unanswered question. Oh, that is the thing, it's not that everything is so clear. It's not that why this is happening. It's not that it's always happening in winter. Maybe there are sometimes certain perceptions. People just guess that this is what happens. So those things need to be looked at. So once you clarify these questions, it should be reviewed. This is what I meant. Then new researcher may restrict themselves to questions that can be answered. Yeah, if you have a working environments, maybe in your own clinic, in your own hospital, or maybe any working group, you try to get the answer, and you may develop maybe a team, a group, look for and see if the answer is not available, some work is to be done. So for instance, here it is another example, systematic review and meta-analysis. When you search for the literature, you may find something like this, of ethnic differences in risks of adverse reaction to drug. You see, this is another thing, ADRs, adverse drug reactions. ADRs. Well, most of the trials done on either European or US or African Americans or even Southeast Asia and so on. You will find that South Indians or South Asians are very few. Okay, so there is a need, because the other day I was reading an article, and in which when one particular drug went through the trial, or they were looking for certain things, right? ADRs, the patient number was such that white were 4,000 and blacks were around 350, and South Asians were around only 150. And then they were claiming that one thing is more common in this, and another is not in this and not this. You cannot compare, with such a huge difference. So that's these kind of things, when you come across in the literature, that will give you an opportunity to think that, oh, the data from my country is missing. This particular thing has not been done in my country. This particular trial has not been done considering us. So this is how you can look into these. Then,
Dr. Siddiqui,
yes, please.
Add one more thing here.
Please.
So for osteoporosis, there is an international database called FRAX, F-R-A-X. And in that, bone density is dependent on a lot of factors.
CS.
A-X.
F-R-A-X. Okay, FRAX. Yeah. So bone density.
Bone density is dependent on, ethnicity and height and weight and so on and so forth. Also, nutritional factors, how much calcium the person is taking, or in the population, how much stunting there was, and so on. Population-based references are critically important.
Yes.
So when FACS was developed, it was predominantly for Europe and
Caucasians and so.
Yes, and those osteoporosis fracture risks do not apply to all populations. So, for example, the Americans can be very tall, African Americans even taller.
Yes.
And Southeast Asians short in height.
Yeah.
So gradually, these numbers were added by,
Yes.
you know, population-based
Yeah.
studies regionally,
Yes.
multiple populations. And finally, recently, Pakistan was also added there.
Okay, good. Now Pakistan, this is good thing. But then you need to see that, I mean, how reliable, how accurate is that all? Is that so? I mean, I'm just making a comment that sometime, when you do these things, then you notice that there are still few things missing. And this is what we call gaps. So you can, look into where are the gaps in the research which is available in this. Like even in FRAX, for instance, you mentioned the gaps initially was that it was just restricted to Caucasians and so. Okay, great. Now, for instance, cancer screening is one thing. Well, are there some preventable cancers one can think of, right? For instance, smoking, gutka chewing, almost, that they are at greater risk. We still don't say that they definitely cause it, but these are greater risk. So the kind of risk involved. Then also screening the lung, oral squamous cell carcinomas rising. Is it true? Maybe not. Breast cancer, yes. In our population, what is the pattern, how is this being treated, and what is the response of treatment and so on. Likewise, gallbladder cancer, right? Why this is so common? Still, the question has not been answered fully. Common in women, maybe say less than 40 years, more common. Why women are more affected, men are not? What are the nutritional causes? What are the other environmental causes? Some people attribute it to the use of oxidized fat. Yes. So when we survey, we try to find out, we find that yes, reused oil is very common. Like we have this habit of eating pakoras and all that from the say shops and so, and so many things one can think about in all those conditions. Likewise, mental health is another. Psychiatric illnesses nowadays looks to be common. So much so that people have started diagnosing themselves, right? Depression. The other day I was reading something that somebody has developed certain software, a certain questionnaire on which you can see yourself whether you are going through depression or not. Well, how reliable are those? Or should a psychiatrist be always involved? Maybe if this is the being practiced here, and you as a psychiatrist, it's your job to see that how many people are utilizing it and so on, and what are the accuracies and what are the conditions. Maybe psychiatrists can do some research that how to do it. Then the causes, treatment, care. Likewise, there are social issues due to this. Is this happening? I mean, for instance, as they say, the disease for us is a double-edged, right? Double-edged thing. That is means that poverty people are facing, and on top of that, when they get disease, it's like a double-edged sword. You are actually killed by both ways. So you have to look into this, that how this issue can be resolved. Then, yeah, autistic children. Nowadays, we hear this so much about autistic children. Is it so? Because the diagnosis were not easy. It was things were not well developed. So, what is the real issue? Well, these are few. I can take so many examples of those kind of things. Yeah, everybody's speciality. one can look into those. Then which research? When it comes to do research, I am a clinician, so I must do clinical research. Maybe it should be hospital based or clinic based, moving around just patients. And then what different types, you collect the data, you involve the nurses, you involve the students and so on. Okay. Then the population and community based, then you come in touch with epidemiologists, and then you work with that. And then the basic, where actually the bench work is involved. But should everybody work in isolation? Because it's a common practice that you go to Karachi University or any other university in the basic science department, particularly on the say biological sciences, they all want to study something related to patient. And the practice is contact a doctor, get the samples, and do the analysis. Okay, everybody in isolation. Those individuals are not trained on epidemiology. So they don't know how to approach, how to design a study. So study design is important, right? Or one can then, this type of approach warrant that it should be a combination. You involve, develop partner, collaboration. And then you can launch a study, studying all the aspects, the clinical, basic, and applied, right? And see, this is how one can go. Like, here is an example. Biomarkers of joint destruction and repair. Identify new and promising biomarkers for diseases characterized by progressive joint destruction. Okay. Then imaging markers, identify different roles that medical imaging can play in clinical trials, and outlining the deliverable that imaging markers must strive to meet to be. Well, one can always look at the medical records. Because usually what happens when the patient with these type of conditions are admitted, they are seen by, there's different tests in the laboratories are done, right? The images, the biochemical or physiological tests they go through. And then one can find out, which one is more accurate. Is it the imaging, or is it the markers, biochemical markers or physiological markers, which, or maybe even which one started, showing up first, more earlier than this, and then the predictive value of a marker can be decided. This is important, because the predictive value, if a simplest of the test, for instance, screening, can give you an idea, there is no need to go maybe to go for the most expensive radiological complicated things. One can think about those things. So define the knowledge gaps. When you study that, look at the gaps which are there in understanding and use of biomarkers. Have people not been using it so effectively, so efficiently? And you're maybe just screening the medical records may tell you, who identified it first, who suspected it first. So looking into all those things, one can develop some sort of good questions related to the research in this. Then
Dr.
again,
Siddiqui,
Gigi, please.
if I can add something to your previous slide here.
Yes, yeah.
For osteoporosis, there is a turnover of the bone that is involved, right? So for bone turnover, one can look at the collagen peptides being excreted in the urine. So one of the collagen peptides that was very useful in accounting for bone turnover was N-telopeptide. N-telopeptide. So
enteropeptides.
N is there are two ends to the protein. The N.
Okay. Yeah.
So the N telopeptides
Yeah.
Correlated with
I was thinking about hydroxyproline maybe or not.
uh, that is the amino acid, and
Yeah.
maybe that can correlate as well.
But
So
because it's specifically related to collagen, that's why.
correct. So you could do DEXA scan, which is
Yeah.
a modified kind of an X-ray, um,
How
to
do you spell DEXA or
DEXA.
DEC?
DEXA.
Yeah. DEXA scan.
Yeah, so you can do that, which is a
Yeah.
radiological
Yeah.
investigation, or you could do this
And then,
urine test
yes.
for antipeptides. Uh,
Yeah.
so,
And urine test may be easy
yes,
and simple.
in rheumatoid arthritis, again, there is bone destruction. So,
Yes.
could have an application over there as well.
Yes.
So this is how, these biomarkers and
Yes.
X-rays, imaging studies can correlate.
Yeah.
From the imaging standpoint,
True.
um,
Yeah.
in terms of rheumatoid arthritis, one could use musculoskeletal ultrasound and look for
Hmm.
joint destruction, which
Yes.
much more sensitive than X-rays.
Hmm.
So मुख्तलिफ किस्म की इन्वेस्टिगेशंस जो हैं वो
Yes.
साइमल्टेनियसली यूज की जाए,
Sure.
या उनकी कोरिलेशंस हमें पता हो, तो उससे
Yeah.
मरीज को काफी ज्यादा फायदा हो सकता है.
Sure. That's great. Good. Right. Then again, imaging technology for osteoarthritis. You have already mentioned about that, right? So better method of imaging do we need and all that? And cytokines. Sorry, I am trying to speed up. Maybe I am going very slow. So then the studies of cytokines, different kinds, and then one need to look at this specifically, how specific they are, right? Because some of these cytokines are raised in other conditions as well, due to infection and inflammation, so on, other inflammatory conditions. Then the cognitive neuroscience research, open field again. New imaging techniques are expensive. There is a less expensive way, is there? One can find out. Again here, one can look for markers. So would integration of multiple technologies help? Dr. Saeed already mentioned to that, right? He mentioned about the ultrasound, musculoskeletal ultrasound in some other condition, but in these cases also, multiple, maybe physiological, biochemical, radiological, can help in certain things. Okay, so once you look into those things, you can identify gaps in research. As I already mentioned, for any topic you search, you will find. For instance, any problem, the problem needs solution. So what is wrong is the problem. What must be done, that is the need to solve that problem, right? And then the solution, this is the description of activities to be undertaken, which you will, uh, present, which you will found out after your research. So specialized clinical research, now we come to another question. I am an established clinician in private practice. I have a special niche for a relatively rare disorder. I have a clinical records of my patients. How can I do research? Test the topic. How can I test this topic? You need to look into that topic. I said that you look in the search, and then you find out in the literature search. Right? And you then need to test that topic, that is it really worth, is it worth going for it? Or it can be, looked into something else. So here is the topic. Rehabilitation for brain injuries. It looks too broad or too narrow or just right. Maybe you can make a decision. My decision is too broad. You can decide because you may be more knowledgeable in so. For any topic, it can. Specific therapy for stroke patients. Is it too broad, too narrow, or just right? For anything you can mark accordingly. And what are the causes of hip fracture in elderly women? Is it too broad or too narrow or just right? We need to look into health needs of elderly in Karachi or maybe in Hyderabad. Then, does exercise improve mental health? Oh, another good question. And what are the best treatment for itching in hospitalized patient? This is what one can look into. So research topic, again, you look into that and look at the rehabilitation of brain injuries. Is mirror therapy something that can solve the issue? And health benefits of green vegetable is in one diets can help. Are leafy vegetables helpful in preventing cardiovascular diseases? It is being commonly promoted. But what happened that a European argued with me that, you people heat it. You people, when you cook, heat it so much that all the vitamins and the valuable things, nutritives are destroyed by heating. But the problem is we cannot afford to eat it raw because, if we don't, we may get some bacterial, right, material and things into that. That's why we need to heat the hygienic things. You know that for instance, one example is H. pylori. The major source that is identified is the raw vegetable like salads and so, because it is not, if it is not extensively washed, that can cause H. pylori and so on. So these are the kind of things which we need to look into. Yes, raw leafy vegetables are good, but really or not? What are the causes of hip fractures in elderly? Is the low vitamin D3, because everybody nowadays is talking about vitamin D3 deficiency. Healthy needs of elderly residents in Hyderabad. Can look into that. Does exercise improve health? Does an outdoor physical activity program improve, right? Mental health status or autistic children, what can be looked into? Some people suggest laptop or iPad. You give to them and they may learn their things, their skills may improve. Now, all that what we see, what we experience, bring us to translational research. I will hand over to Dr. Saeed and just some little emergency, Dr. Saeed, and you take it and I'll join anyway.
Okay. So regarding the last question also, one can look at if there's a specific niche, you are looking at a specific kind of disorder that is rare, then the first thing may be to put out a case series and do descriptive research. Unless it has already been done and there is nothing that really needs to be added there. But the first thing would be to put your cases together and publish that as a case series or descriptive research. Second would be to then look at try and investigate the causes for it, or look at how one could diagnose the disease earlier, or how one could treat it better. So there are really three aspects to these, and this comes to what is known as translational research. So if one is, a busy clinical consultant, and one wants to combine basic science and clinical medicine, one would want, and one doesn't have a research laboratory, then the first thing would be to really collaborate. And collaboration is really done between people. It is not about the setups. So you have to be able to get along very well with your collaborator. It is really the trust that determines what is happening to your research. So when two people come together or a group of people come together, it is the trust that determines what is going to be the final result of your project. So somebody brings in funding, another one brings in a clinical resource, third one brings in maybe basic science ideas or laboratory facilities. And when you put all of this together, that's how you can do research. So sometimes, the funding is an issue. I'm sorry, we've lost the slides here, but
Oh, is the slide? Sorry.
no, I cannot see the slides, Dr. Siddiqui.
Let me reload.
Yeah, anyway, so
Is it
funding.
working or not?
Just share the slide, please. Yeah. In case you don't have um, funding can be an issue. So one can get funding by writing your grant together. And to be able to do that, you've got to at least put out some initial data as a group. That can be done. Yes. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Um, right. Next slide, please. Um, yes. We've gone over this one. Next one.
Okay.
So
Funding.
yes. So the first thing would be to put do a limited with whatever resources you've got, limited finances, limited time. You put a database together, at least put out your ideas on a minimal scale, and show what you all can do together as a group. Next would be to obtain the funding to expand on the project, and that is done by writing a grant. And you could apply to various agencies which fund grant. Most of them are governments, world governments or regional governments, and that can fund your program. Second is industry partnership. But third is really very interesting. Very often you are unable to get even the industry to partner with you, but your disease, your passion for solving really leads to mobilizing your own patients and their families to sponsor research into that. Public sponsorship. And it's very important to keep the focus to a single bench experimental technique that will minimize your experimentation expenses and launch your lab and study group. Next slide, please, sir. Let me give you the example of the disease called amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's a very, very severe disease, completely paralyzing and fatal. Yet these patients would walk 1 mile along Lake Michigan in Chicago and across the United States once a year, where they and their families would walk with them with their t-shirts on of various teams. For the entire year, they would go around and collect funds for the research. So, and on that day, they would donate that fund to one of the ALS organizations, which would then fund research labs. And that's how research can be done as well. It's not common practice in Pakistan. We do a lot of philanthropy
Yeah.
for patient care, but it's important to understand that for patient care to be successful, you have to be able to come up with innovative solutions, and that requires funding. And if we can build such a culture, I think research in Pakistan would really take off. So that's the message from me as far as the translational medicine is concerned. I really, it was amazing to participate in these walks. and to look at the courage of these patients. And our patients are no less brave. And I think this work can be potentially done in Pakistan as well. Dr. Siddiqui, hand over to you.
Great. Right. Now, in the translational research, they say that, it could take 17 years from bench, when the things are identified, to bedside.
Dr. Siddiqui, just a reminder,
application. G.
3 minutes remaining.
Sure. Previous one or this? Hello?
We total have 3 minutes remaining for the...
Okay. Right. So it is, I just like to go over it quickly, that the basic research, when you start from the bench or a phase 1, which is also sometime called in clinical trial, phase 1, but the initial trial, pre-trial thing, that you do it first, and then it moves on to human research and clinical research, and after passing through several phases and come into practice. As I said, that some estimate shows it's 17 years, and people are working how to reduce this time, this period. Right. So what happens is that in clinical and translational research, there are what they have identified or called valleys of death, that once basic biomedical is researched and something unique is identified, so people get very excited, oh, very promising. And then what happens, that it goes down as some tests are being done, and they call it valley of death at some places. This may not then, say the end of the tunnel. And so then the clinical research applied, and then there are results and knowledge that is gathered. And then again, this can face certain issues. And finally, then it comes up. If it goes through that, the clinical practice and health decision making can help. So these are different phases which one go through. These things one can, if you're interested, you can read it. The references are there. And in clinical trials, 1 year is spent on preclinical or animal research for anything new drug, new method, right? New equipment and things. And then phase 1 is usually tested in fewer numbers, maybe 20 in clinics. And then the larger scale, about 100 to 300 people, 1 to 2 years, which are called phase 2, and they check the efficacy and safety of the drug. And then later on, phase 3, the efficacy and safety on a much larger population. Before, it is like in US, the FDA, and in fact, everybody all over the world follow the FDA ruling for certain drugs. In Pakistan, also the drug regulatory authority is there. So this is a time-consuming thing. Then we come on to some of the differences. In fact, there are 10 differences identified between men and women. And those 10 differences, which have been highlighted, are: number 1, heart disease. Kills about 500,000 American women each year, over 50,000 more women than men. Isn't
Dr.
it
Siddiqui,
something alarming? G. Okay.
1 minute.
So these 10 differences we can, you can, can we share the slides with them later, so that
Sure, go over the slide.
they can go through this, right? So 10 differences are listed there, and one can read into those. These are sometimes, very interesting, that, for instance, in anesthesia,